Welcome. I'm Riley Karsh.
I'm Tova Kopan.
We are thrilled to bring you the We Go Boldly podcast.
Let's talk big burning questions, life changes, and maybe a bit of personal business.
Let's be bold and brave together. Are you ready?
I am. Here comes the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to We Go Boldly, the podcast. We are, as always, so very excited to have you with us on the show today. It is episode 7 of season 6, and we are loving this season. I'm finding it fascinating, a little bit like an attack, all the things, right? Before we dive in and get into what is sure to be another really, really fascinating interview that I am super, super excited about, I am going to do what I always do and welcome my fantastical, wonderful, magnificent, I think that's the word I'm moving towards.
That's what we're going for?
I think so. Co-host Tova to the show. How are you today, Tova? What's shaking?
You know, it is. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to channel the Tova that is existing when this episode comes out. So we are actually this season really trying to be proactive, especially
I'm like real proud of us.
The summer.
Yes.
And so we're quite a few weeks ahead. So this episode is coming out, I believe, right after the 4th of July. And that Tova has had, fireworks and hot dogs, and she's feeling good.
Mm-hmm.
The current Tova is dealing with the end of school.
Right.
So
it's a very different reality.
Very different Tova. And so I am really just like bringing in July vibes to this interview. And I'm also super excited for this interview.
Yeah, I really, really am. But that's actually true, because before we started, when I had to calm myself down so I didn't jump on and yell at you all about how excited I was to be here.
How magnificent I am.
I was envisioning myself on a pool float. And so, yeah, total July vibes.
This episode is coming out mere days from us going away for our company retreat, which there will be not a float, but a pool involved.
Yes.
So I think that this says something about busyness, and I hope that everyone to pull us back to the topic at hand.
Right.
This has been a big conversation, and I feel like every season is important to us and affects us, Riley and I being us. But this particular season, I think, speaks to areas of growth that we are working on personally, because it's the one that feels most painful. And it's the one that I'm like, you're doing a season on busyness, for the love of Pete, calm yourself down,
right.
And so I find these topics to be just incredibly worthwhile to talk about. And I hope that those of you who are listening are also feeling that same way.
Yeah, I agree. I think the other seasons were maybe we've done more personal work on already. Yes. And this one, I've done some of the work, but I'm realizing there's a lot more to go.
More work to do on both the busyness and the worth side.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yep.
So after all of that being said, we are thrilled to have a guest with us today. And Tova, you're going to introduce her. I'm really super excited to have her on the show, but I'll turn it over to you to introduce her to our listeners / viewers and take over from here.
Yes. So we are so excited to have the wonderful mom advocate, Alyson McNair, join our show today. Alyson, so just some background so everyone can get as excited as we are. Alyson was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. She started her career at age 14 as an office assistant for the East New York Betterment, a nonprofit that assisted the elderly. And it was there that she learned how nonprofits are so pivotal to helping changing communities. Upon graduating from Hofstra with a BA in political science, she moved to Washington, D.C. metro area to work on Capitol Hill. Shortly after, she was able to transfer her fantastic, invaluable experience she gained from working on the Hill to the private industry with BAE Systems, a defense contracting company. and it was at BAE Systems that her assignments included working with the company's political action committee, government affairs, communications, trade show development, and the human resources department. So all the things. During her employment with BAE Systems, she realized even more about the hardships of people gaining employment after incarceration and decided to start a nonprofit to address the issue. So therefore, she began conceptualizing and planning for Perfect Inc., a non-profit that provides job training, job placement, and lifestyle coaching for women who have been incarcerated. Alyson is passionate about creating a world where women who have been incarcerated can receive the proper support needed to become contributing citizens to society. Alyson is currently studying for her second bachelor's and master's of business administration at Marymount University. She is, like I said, a wife, a mother. We're so excited to have you here. Welcome, Alyson. How are you?
Yay! Thank you so much. That bring me back to memory lane of the roller coasters of my life so far. But I am doing great. How are you guys doing?
We are great. Yeah, it's funny because sometimes we get people's bios and we cut them down a little. So, and I said to Riley, I was like, I can't cut anything out. I love it all. I'm so excited to talk about all of it. Because it's, from the fact that you started working when you were 14 and you were working at a nonprofit is just amazing. So I think we'll maybe jump right in the deep end and go, with the easy questions that we love to ask on this show. You have clearly taken this amazing path and you have, really set big goals for yourself and frankly, very big goals for the world and high expectations, which, is wonderful. So my first question to you is, how do you define success?
So for me, success is defined by the impact you can make in the lives of others, more than the dollar amount or the houses or the cars, because those things are futile, right? You can have them and then it's then what? But the impact that you make in the lives of others to help them to be better, to help them to get on the path that they want to get on, to me, that's real life success that kind of leads over into legacy that could cause individuals to then make that impact into someone else's life. And then you kind of have this snowball effect of things happening long after you're gone.
Is that something that you grew up with? So you started working at 14. Is that kind of how your family values were put upon you, or how your parents raised you? What was that? Where does that come from for you?
So it totally comes from my family. My mom raised us in a single parent household.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother doesn't say in my bio, but she was the director of East New York Betterment. So even before I was able to work at 14, there would be times that, working with senior service agencies, they had to deliver meals. They had a Meals on Wheels program. So here was my mom in tow because she's a single mom. And if I'm out of school, what is she going to do with me? So I'm in tow with her delivering meals to seniors. I'm in tow with her, dropping them off at the senior center and then picking them up. So I think it was just kind of my pastor, Michael Freeman, he says that more is caught than taught. So I think it was the being in the car with my mom, seeing her doing all of this for the seniors. And they were always so thankful and so appreciative, because as I realized, and I think back now, a lot of them didn't have anyone. They were alone. So these interactions with my mom and the individuals that worked at the organization was kind of all of the interactions that some of them got from individuals. So it was just seeing her do that and then kind of being forced into it that I think subliminally it was being instilled in me that this is what we do and this is what life is all about.
Did you ever feel like you needed to rebel against that? Did that ever feel like work to you, or did it just feel natural?
It kind of, growing up was just kind of life. Yep. But then I did it at 14. But then once I was able to kind of get my working papers, because I was summer youth. So once I was able to get my working papers, working with a nonprofit was nowhere in sight at all. I just wanted to finish high school, become a lawyer, make tons of money, and then go live my fabulous life with my 5 kids and my, husband being a doctor, like the Cosby Show, right? So, so that was my goal and that was my way of thinking. And it's so funny how you can kind of have these plans and then life will take you in totally different direction where you never thought you would end up, whether good or bad, you actually end up there. So to answer the question, yes, totally rebelled. And then kind of not rebelled because my mother never said, hey, you should run a nonprofit, but the things in our household was more of not even really help people. That was just my mom's life. That's what she did all the time, was help people. And I think, like I said, more was caught than taught. Yeah. And she never even intended this life for me. So yes, rebel, but kind of not, because she never said don't do it.
Right. I understand.
Yeah. So it's clear, what was so important to your mom. How did your family, your mom, how did you sort of prioritize things? Like, that's a big responsibility that she had, but then how did she sort of prioritize how she used her time and her energy, or how your family kind of split that up when you were kids?
My mom, I thank her to this day for everything. What was really good is that her younger sister kind of came into the fold to kind of take care of me or whatever. And then her younger sister got married and he kind of became my father figure. Because my father wasn't out of the picture, he just didn't live in the household. And what my mother was a master of was delegating. And now being the woman, like thinking about busyness, it's kind of like you could get involved in like so many things, like whether you're ashamed of like saying saying no and having someone look at you negatively, or for whatever reason, we kind of, I think as women, pile all of these things on our plate, right? And my mother, she was so good to identify, I can't do everything. So I have to identify help. And that help came in different forms, whether it was like my older brother, taking me bowling for the day or doing something so she could just have a break, which I had no clue she needed a break as a mom.
Right.
But like whether it was my older brother or my sister, her assignment was like to pick me up from school. And when she went to high school and she couldn't do it, my mom was able to find an older cousin that could pick me up from school. So I think that her way of managing was really just being able to identify what she could do, what she couldn't do, and then delegating to people. And like to this day, I have to say, like, Mom, you're not the boss of me. I'm like an adult. Like, you can't just keep delegating this stuff for me and creating my schedule. But nonetheless, I call her to this day the master delegator.
Well, I was just going to say, what's really interesting about that is it's such an innate leadership quality, and it's such a great teaching tool, because what she was doing was giving all of these people in your life the opportunity to just sort of step up into their own power, right? And their ability to lead them, become leaders themselves, whether it was conscious or not. That's such like a innate leadership skill. And obviously she, as you were saying, she was teaching you all along. She wasn't sort of like smashing you over the head with it, but she was just sort of showing you the way. It was like leading breadcrumbs along the way for you to follow, which is such a beautiful sort of gift to give as somebody who unfortunately keeps trying to smash my kids over the head with their lessons. So it's good to hear, as from parents to parents, right? Like, no, this is a much better way to teach your children. Like, okay, this is the path you want to take. But also as a way to alleviate some of that busyness. Like, we all feel like we have to be the one to do it sometimes, right? But you can't possibly do it all. And so what an interesting story. And as we were saying in the beginning, Tova and I, this season is such a learning experience for both of us. And I feel like I am taking so much in, and this is like my own little class that I've created. And I'm just like, oh, okay, this is what I have to do. This is how I have to get better at these things.
Yeah. And I'm sort of wondering, because as I'm sitting here, I'm thinking, Oh, so when I have somebody else pick up my child from something or take them somewhere, are they seeing me as a good delegator, or like how, so like,
Right.
when did you sort of realize what she was doing? Like, because as kids, it's like, oh, okay, I'm going with my sister, I'm going with my brother, I'm going with my cousin. Okay. But like, was it when you finally had kid, when you became a mom yourself, or like, when did you sort of realize that that's what she was doing?
You hit the nail on the head. It wasn't until I had kids and got married that I really realized, and surprisingly enough, we talked kind of before about oversharing, but my husband had these theories in his head of what I should do as mom and as a wife. And I didn't know that I was debunking those theories, but all I had was my mom really and my aunt. And that's what they showed me. So when he came with like these views of like, I should cook all the time, or I'm responsible for brushing my boy's hair, I was like, no, I'm not. Like, you're here, you can totally do it. And that's when I realized that something that she was doing to really just get by as a single parent, because she never knew the luxury of being able to say, okay, my husband, you can take this. And then my mom, she grew up, she was born in the 1940s. So for my grandmother, my grandfather, some of those traditional roles were in place, but she just did what she needed to do as a single mom. So I don't even think she knew what she was necessarily doing. She was just kind of trying to get by and do the best she can. And I really didn't realize it until I got married, until I had my kids, to just say, you know what? I don't have to do everything. You're right here. You have two hands. We are going to identify what's best for you, what's best for me. And that's how our household is going to function. And then that's when the light bulb like went off. Like, you just delegate what you can't do. And it's totally okay. Because I think sometimes in our society, and of course it's definitely changing, but I think that maybe I kind of feel like when I got married and I had kids, I also was kind of feeling like shame, like, oh man, like my husband is, playing with my kids. I haven't taken them to the park. I'm their mom. I should take them to the park. And I really just had to come to grips with that line of thinking and just say, no, I don't. They're still loved. And I still, do what I can with them when I'm able to do it. But I set myself to these priorities right here. And this is what I'm going to accomplish for me. And I refuse to feel bad about it. So that's like what it kind of like, literally that release almost of that pressure kind of gave me freedom to just say the heck with it, So even now when I go to pick up my kids, and some of the moms, they're so sweet and they're like, oh, we can go hang out at the park. And I'm like, hey, I'm not that mom. I'm not going to hang out at the park. I don't like the park. I don't like outside. That's their dad's duty. If you want to go out and get like appetizers or something, I'm there. But I'm not going to hang out at the park, mom.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's okay that, so I would kind of say like, I wouldn't kind of say, I will say that that's when I realized operating in this mom and wife function role.
Well, I'm going to take this word delegate and just keep it all the time now, because we talk about words a lot on this show, and there's words, it drives Riley and I crazy. And I cannot think of any example. Maybe you can think of an example of a word like this that should not have a negative meaning or side meaning in society, but it does. Mm-hmm. But delegate, as I hear you using it, it's not one of the words that has like, oh, they delegate. That doesn't have a negative connotation. And so many times these words, the word itself doesn't have a negative connotation, but the way we feel with the word does. Mm-hmm. But delegate is one that I'm like sitting with here, listening to you talk and going, no, that feels very okay. Like, I feel very comfortable saying I delegate. That's how we get things done. And even like my poor children are going to be hearing, no, I'm delegating that to you. Like this morning, we were like rushing out of the house and my oldest had to take some medicine and he's like, can you get me some water? And I was like, no, I can't. Now, of course, my youngest would have like made himself a sandwich and gotten water because he's like the youngest, he used to fend for himself. But my oldest is still 10 going, can you please get me some water? And I was like, no, the cups are over there. The water's in the spigot. Like, go get your water.
Right.
But now I'll be like, no, I'm delegating that to you, my poor children. But I'm leaning into it because I like I said, I really just love how, you know, your mom did it out of necessity. And as a single parent, I can relate to that, but also how you've now taken it and it doesn't feel the shame that other words sometimes feel. We need to take a quick break.
Yeah.
And then we'll come back. I do have a few more questions just about some things about you growing up before we leave your childhood as a topic, but we'll take a quick break and we'll be right back. Tova here. I'll admit, when I think of a coach, I immediately think knee-high socks, whistles, and clipboards. Is it because I love Ted Lasso?
Maybe. I mean, I think it's a good look for you, if I'm being honest.
Thanks, I think. Anyway, that's not the kind of coaching we want to talk to you all about.
True. We are talking about life and transition coaching, though I do still love a clipboard and a tube sock.
Both Riley and I are lucky to have worked with incredible coaches throughout our lives.
Before that, though, we struggled with where to start, believing in what coaching could really do for us, and, of course, putting ourselves first.
Taking the leap and working with our coaches made all the difference. They gave us direction and support when we needed it most.
Now, we are fortunate enough to be coaches ourselves, and we're excited to pay it forward.
We can help you figure out where to start, create a roadmap, keep you accountable, and get to living your limitless life.
Sounds pretty great. So if you want to figure out your next steps, check out our services at goboldlyinitiative.com/services.
We can't wait to talk to you. Now, back to the show. Okay, welcome back, everyone. So before we leave the topic of just growing up and this amazing person that your mother was, I would love to know, as you were growing up, what sort of behaviors did you receive positive reinforcement for? Because that can also really guide, you know, what we rebel against and what we don't, and how we grow as a person. So if you were given a gold star, you know, what behavior elicited that?
So in my household,
or you can talk about larger society, whatever you feel like.
yeah, surprisingly enough, growing up, I don't ever remember getting like the gold stars or the affirmation from like teachers or people. Because once again, so we're talking about standards, right? So like in the class, they want you to be the child that like sits with your hands like this, and you're up and you're quiet and you're everything that makes the teacher's day go better, which I'm all for. My son just got an award for that. And I'm like, yay! But for me, I was always the outspoken one. I was always the one that you're never gonna hush me. And it really was delicate because from a teacher's perspective, it was like disrespectful. But from my perspective, I was just standing up for myself. And I have no idea where I got that from. But so I remember plenty of times where my mom had to go to school, you know, because the teacher is just like, hey, like she's out of control and don't give her donuts before breakfast and like all of these things. And my mom never necessarily took the teacher's word as gospel. She always would come in to my defense. I guess maybe kind of thinking like she's a child, so maybe you don't understand how she functions, but this is how she works. So let me tell you how to get the best out of her. So that way you stop banging your head against the door. But my mom, I never got in trouble for it. And I would say that the only time that I can remember where being a child like that was so vocal, most, like I said, teachers, they never wanted to kind of excel you or, you know, see the other qualities you had. And I was in the 4th grade, and there was a teacher. I'll never forget her name to this day, Miss Griffith. And she was the only one that said, "You are so freaking smart. And I see all of this stuff over here, but it doesn't really matter." And she excelled me, not like I was left back, but like, a PS systems is like, I don't know, like say if you're in the 5th grade, it's like class F1, which like the smart kids. And then you go F2 and the F3, and then it gets down to like problem kids. And I was like an F3 level. And she took me from 4th grade and she put me in an F1 class, which at that age I knew was a big deal. And I would say that was like my gold star moment, if you will, because she was able to just see beyond the vocal being so vocal and then just see another quality that needed to be acknowledged, and kind of went from there. So I would say that was probably my gold star moment from an academic perspective. And then from a personal perspective, I don't know. I don't think I ever my mother was always loving, but it was never kind of like, "Oh my gosh, great job." But instead of being negative, she just always pushed for greater. And she just always set the bar high, and you knew the standard, whether if the standard was here and you came here, fine, but you knew that standard was here. So I would say that those were my childhood interactions for gold star moments.
Do you feel like you are still kind of, or not still, but do you feel like you are looking for gold star moments now? Do you feel like that's a part of your life now? We live in an achievement culture, right? We live in a culture that pushes us to seek out gold star moments, for better or worse. Do you ever feel like that's something that you're seeking or looking for?
I would probably say in my 20s, I probably was like really just kind of seeking that gold star or like that approval.
Mm-hmm.
But once in like 2004 was like a really rough time for me. And I was able to just literally just kind of get involved in like ministry and just switch my focus. And it totally just allowed me to know that I'm a child of God, and like what comes with that line of thinking, what comes with those beliefs. And from getting that information, it really just kind of flipped the switch to me. And I said, who cares? At the end of the day, and another saying that my pastor like said that I think kind of started that process is, he says, divorce yourself from the opinions of others. And when I first heard that term, it was like what? I can do that? I don't have to care. And it really just kind of like did the switch to get deeper. And now I think I kind of, with the exception probably of my husband, that is like, okay, that's a relationship where I gotta kind of like bend, we gotta kind
the
of
occasional compromise.
Right.
Yeah.
You gotta do the power of compromise.
But
But other than that, I think I kind of don't necessarily care what people think, because at the end of the day, God forbid I die tomorrow, your thought process of me is not going to matter. You're 9 times out of 10, they're going to go on with their lives. And I would never want to say I didn't do everything I wanted to do in life because of what somebody else was going to think of it. And to me, I think that thought scares me more than the thoughts of what people actually think about me. And it doesn't mean that I'm, rude or rambunctious. Where I can improve, of course I'll improve. But as far as holding me back, nah, I don't care anymore.
I think that's such an important distinction that people seem to miss, right? That it's not about being tactless.
Yes.
Right. It's not about like running rampant through the world, like some sort of, Terminator. It's that, having self-worth and acknowledging your own value above others' opinions is not the same as rampaging the earth with your nastiness. Those are two very different things.
Yeah.
Right. And I wanted to call that out because that's what you just said, but I just wanted to reiterate it so that, in case anyone missed it, that's a really important point. And it's something that people miss a lot, because it's not being rude, it's not being nasty, it's not being hurtful, it's being true to who you are and being, you're obviously a very kind, loving human. And so being that person and bringing that person to the table and being okay with that person without worrying about what everyone else is doing or saying and thinking about you is very different than being, somebody who's nasty and cruel. Those are very different things. I think I've said it 4 times now, so hopefully whoever's listening heard me.
Well, and I think that, when we were talking about that gold star moment, there we
Hard
go.
to say, right? I tripped over it
really
too.
Is, that the fact that your mom was like, well, you're not going to get in trouble for being who you are.
Yes.
Like, I'm sure she wasn't going to put up with like actual rudeness, but I have a child who I have had to talk to teachers about, like, this is how you're going to reach him. But also, like, once he's lost, like, you've lost him. And like, so like, let me help you. Let me help you. But I think that, I don't tolerate rudeness from my children, at least towards other people. I'm their mom, so who knows what they say to me, but like, it's mayhem, but towards other people. But at the same time, I'm also don't want them to ever have to apologize for being who they are. And it sounds like you got that reinforcement as a young child, that like, you're not going to get in trouble for being who you are. Just, is it like, I don't know if it's Glennon Doyle or somebody who says something about just like, these aren't your people. Like, right. those, if you are too much for your teacher, like, she's just not your person. And that says just as much about her or more than it does about you. And I think that is such a big thing. And I don't know how many, if any, people in their 20s listen to this, but you're not the first person who was mentioned, like, well, in my 20s, this is kind of what I was thinking. And now, and it's just like, oh, if you could have only realized this.
Right. How much would you like to just rewind a couple decades and be like, listen,
let me give you a heads up.
Right. Like, you're going to hit 40 and you are not going to care at all. You're going to be like, whatever, people. Sorry, I digress. But so, I'm going to ask this question, and I think the answer has already been given, but I just want to give you a chance to sort of talk through it and a little bit more. But where do you feel like your self-worth and your feeling of worthiness comes from? Where do you feel like that source is derived from for you?
That is such a great question. And it's a great question because I think in our society, male or female, or whichever pronoun is used, I think that's like an ongoing question for just us as humans, right? And I think for me, like, one, it was having the example of women in my lives that were so strong. Like, my mom was a strong woman. And then we have my second mom, which is my mother's biological sister, and all them both moms. She was also strong, but she was the example of kind of kindness or gentleness, where my mom was the example of, no, this is what we're going to do, and I was able to see both of those examples. And I don't know how, but I was able to see what I wanted to be and kind of take from both of them and kind of take it as I went up. And then, like I said, like, once I joined my current ministry, Spirit of Faith Christian Center, and that whole new world was open of, okay, you believe God, it's just not a, your get out of hell free card, but here's like the book of what's available. And this is who you say you are. And it's like, for me, it was just like, whoa, okay. And I think that's kind of where the choice came to believe this is my self-worth and this is how I'm going to reflect that and show that to the world, than not making the choice to say, no, this is where I am and this is what I'm going to choose to believe, because everything is a choice. So in my 20s, when I had all of those images of like, this is what your body should look like. This is how you please a person. This is how you get a boyfriend to just, really want to be with you for the rest of your life. And you have all of these things. And it's like you try to aspire to those and you choose that. And then later in life, you'll either stay on that track or you'll say, you know what, who cares? This is my track. This is where I'm going to go. And this is what I'm going to do. So I believe it's a choice, number one. But for me, it was really just came to life like once I found my ministry.
So I mean, it really sounds like you have spent time on this. So maybe this question doesn't totally work, but I still want to ask it because I think it's something that even the most evolved person when it comes to worth struggles with.
Yeah.
Which is, you brought delegation into your life, as I just love that word, I'm just gonna keep saying it, as a way to sort of combat the busyness maybe, and be okay with the, when you say yes to something. But as a society, we rely so heavily on productivity and busyness to speak to our worth, right? Like if you don't get that to-do list done, so even though I really feel like you have this strong sense of your own personal worth, how do you keep like society out of the way? Yeah. So you don't and maybe you don't, and maybe you're like, well, this is a struggle, which is also helpful to know. But like, how do you, if you are capable, how do you keep that sense of like, I need to keep achieving to prove up my worth, whether it's a daily achievement or whether it's keep mastering something. And just to be clear, as we read in your bio, you're working right now. We are all for goals that people are excited to achieve, as long as they're, not just there to like achieve for the sake of achievement, if that, so I'm not diminishing those, like, that sounds great what you're working on.
Once again, I would say you hit the nail on the head, because like it is a daily struggle, right? Because there's always going to be something that's presented before you on a daily basis or a weekly basis that wants to challenge what you already believe, or wants to challenge what you've kind of already settled. So it would be awesome to say like, no, I go through lily fills all day, I'm good. But the reality is not the case. It really is something where you have to choose it every single day. And there's a scripture that says like, God says like, okay, I place before you life and death, choose life. And to me, that scripture, whether you believe in God or you don't believe in God, it's like, okay, think about it. Before you is life and death, right? So death doesn't necessarily have to mean physical, but it can mean like, okay, is this decision going to bring me peace, or is it going to bring me anxiety if I say yes to this? Because now it's the 10th thing on my to-do list and I don't know how it's going to get done, but I'm so afraid about what you're going to think about me. I'm willing to go through the anxiety to get it done. Okay, that's total death, right? And then it's life like, hey, you know what? I so appreciate that you asked me to do this. I really, really do. But you know what? I don't have the bandwidth. And part of that for me is being okay to say, I'm not Superwoman and I can't do it all. I would love to do it all. But there's like a commercial. There's this great commercial. And it's this guy who has a bench press, and he has like, I don't know if you guys saw it, but it's this heavy, the bench press, with the weights, and it's so heavy, he can't even lift it. And then the guy comes from behind him like, hey, can I help you lift that? He's like, no, I don't care, what people might say about me. I'm just gonna work through it. And it's a commercial for like therapy. And it's like, therapy's here to help. And it's like, you got to identify, you know what? Either I need the help, or B, I'm not going to put myself in that situation where it's going to end up adding negative to my space, to my thought patterns, to my mind, and then in the past, I've done that. I've said yes to things, either A, because it's like, okay, you're trying to be an overachiever, where I'm then crying to my husband or yelling at my husband because he didn't really do anything but ask me what's for dinner. And I'm like stressing about these 6 other things, or about the homework I didn't get accomplished. And he's like, dude, I just asked what's for dinner. So it's kind of like living through those moments and being able to identify, you know what, I don't want those anymore. And then being able to say, okay, when it comes to me, am I choosing life or am I choosing death? And it's hard because in the moment, sometimes those no's will seem catastrophic. Like, if I turn this down, what am I missing out on? Or if I turn this down, I'm totally going to be missing out. And sometimes you just got to put on your big girl pants, as I say, and just make the hard choice. But it is, for me at least, a daily struggle.
Yeah. Oh, yes to all of that.
I know.
By
I'm
the
just
way,
sitting here listening. I'm like
absorbing.
Okay, yeah.
right now.
I need to like take notes. Where's a notepad? I need.
I like it. That was brilliant. Thank you for that. We do.
I
We're gonna
needed
take a
that.
little break because I'm gonna absorb that a little bit more. No, but in all seriousness, we do need to take our second break. When we come back, I really want to talk to you about Perfect and how that started, how that came about, and sort of hear more about what's going on with the company or the organization, I should say. So let's take a quick break and we'll be right back, everyone. In case you didn't already know, we love talking.
True story. More than simply talking, we love researching, prepping, and bringing this podcast to life.
We launched We Go Boldly with the goal of reaching people dealing with the kinds of questions and concerns that we also face.
Things like how to hear my inner voice, how to make sure my habits are worth it and stick, how do I feel my feelings and still manage to function.
After years of personal work and lots of trial and error, we realized we have a lot to share on these topics.
Now we've been broadcasting for over a year, and we are proud of our podcast.
And to no one's surprise, we still have a lot to say and talk about.
We sure do. We need your help to keep going. Every episode takes time and money to create, and we would love your support.
So, if you like what we are doing, please support us by joining our Patreon community and becoming a monthly subscriber.
Join our Patreon community today at patreon.com/wegoboldly. We are so grateful to all of our supporters. Now, back to the show.
Okay, so welcome back. And like I was saying before the break, you started an organization called Perfect Inc. I got that right?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, good. Phew, I have a Swiss cheese memory. It's terrible. It's embarrassingly bad.
The good news is every time she watches a movie, it's like the first time.
It is like the first time every single time. It's
awesome.
It's actually very embarrassing.
I think it's awesome.
It's awful. Anyway, you've started this organization, which sounds amazing and wonderful, and the work you're doing sounds amazing. Why don't you tell us a little bit about it? And then I would love to understand sort of why you decided to start the organization and kind of how it came about.
So Perfect is a nonprofit, and we empower women formerly incarcerated, and we do it kind of in three focus areas. It's employment training, employment placement, which means that at the end of our curriculum, we actually find a position for them that has career growth. And then the third part is what we call lifestyle coaching, which is really kind of that mental health support. Because what most people don't realize is like, okay, someone is in prison, that is trauma. And then usually there's trauma that's experienced before incarceration, definitely trauma during incarceration. And then when you're released, you have all of this anxiety because there's all of these pressures to get your life back on track. So we offer that lifestyle coaching component of it to kind of help with the traumas, to help identify, help to give healthy responses to those traumas, and then how to keep it sustainable for life growth. So that's what Perfect does. It is my baby. I am emotionally tied to this company. I have to say that. We had a consulting firm that's like, hey, maybe we should change the name because no one really gets it unless you're explaining it. And I'm like, oh, the name? I'm
That's
totally
all right.
emotionally
That's all right.
connected to this. But The way that the organization started was as I was working at BAE Systems at the time, and I was going into a coworker's office, and I had this random thought. I've always been into like fashion and clothes and everything. Like I can eat, sleep, breathe it. And I was going into a coworker's office, and I had this random thought that people who's been incarcerated, they're not CEOs because they just need to know how to dress and they need to know etiquette. How Looking back now, that was so naive because I honestly had no clue of the systematic issues. But that was like my grand idea. So she said, well, you know what? I said, I can do this, but I don't know how to teach people how to dress. I just know how to dress. She's like, well, go work for this person, their personal stylist, be their assistant, they'll teach you. So I'm like, oh, that sounds good. So I went and did that. And then that was back in 2004. I totally got distracted with various things, becoming a personal stylist, getting married, having kids, all of this stuff. And then in 2000, the latter part of 2018, my husband and I, we owned an insurance company, and I just wasn't happy. Like I literally hated it. I just hated it. And I was just like, this isn't what I want to do. So I went to my husband. I was like, hey, I don't want to do this anymore. And he was like, okay, fine, do what you want to do. I'm like, okay, great. But I had no clue what that was. So this latter part of 2018, my kids are in preschool. So I'm not with them, during the day. I can't stand folding clothes and like cleaning and all of that stuff. It's like, oh my gosh, this is so boring. So got to a certain point where it was like, okay, God, listen, what am I supposed to be doing? Because I'm bored out of my mind. This is not fun. And the nonprofit came back up, and I just started doing research. And originally I was going to do it for men because they're the predominant population of people formerly incarcerated. And I spoke with someone, and she was just like, hey, you should do it for women. And I kind of went down that path and found that most programs are geared towards men because they're a predominant population. But women, we have a psychological and an emotional and physical need that programs don't deal with. And because of that, I said, okay, well, we're going to start this organization. We're going to do it just for women. And the basis really behind it was just wanting to just kind of help, because they were like the forgotten population. Usually people say like, hey, were you incarcerated? I've never been incarcerated. My mom wasn't incarcerated. Sisters or cousin wasn't incarcerated. But for some reason, it just became a burning desire for me to just help this population. And the curriculum was based out of, all throughout my entire career, there's always been someone like an angel to just help me with the stuff I don't know, help me with the things that I needed to correct, whether it was triples checking an email before you send it out or whatever it was. There was always people that was there to help me along in the process. And that's where we kind of identified as just that women who's been formerly incarcerated, they just need an advocate. And I just decided that our organization was just going to be their advocate, and we were going to walk hand in hand with them until they got to a point where they was like, hey, I'm good. Let me take somebody else's hand.
Do you, first of all, amazing. It's wonderful. What you're doing is amazing. As a recovering attorney who, and I am recovering from it. I always wanted to work in social justice, and particularly with formerly incarcerated populations and in prison reform. I think what you're doing is amazing. I never did because law school is expensive.
No kidding.
There is that. But do you, just to sort of tie everything together, when we learned sort of about your organization, Tova and I were talking about how much the system itself must impact self-worth, and how much our culture obviously impacts the self-worth of currently incarcerated and formerly incarcerated women. Is that something that you sort of address? Is it something I'm sure it's something you think about, but is it something that comes up in your program? How does that play in?
It plays in, I would probably say, the crux of the organization. When I first came up with the curriculum, I was thinking that our niche as a program was being able to say, you finish our curriculum, you get a job. That's the best thing that we can do. And what we find with our every cohort is that the job isn't the best thing for them. It's the confidence building. And we have an exercise where they have to write a letter to themselves and they have to introduce themselves in that letter. And I would say 98% of the time they start with saying, hey, I'm a felon. My name is blah, 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 blah. And the letter goes in and we take the letters and very in a non-judgmental matter, but just in a thought-provoking matter, say, hey, what made you start it with, I'm a felon? And usually they say, well, I am a felon. And we say, well, why didn't you start with, I'm a mom, I'm a friend, I'm a sister? Why are you choosing this to be your adjective? And what we found is that once they're released in any form that they fill out, it's always going to be a checkbox that says, are you a felon? Have you committed a felony? And it's like everything that's like screaming at them to continue to keep them bound in this box to just say, you're a felon, that's it. Nothing else you can be. But when the reality of it is that you're a felon, yeah. I have something on my record for a few speeding tickets. I don't ever start my introduction as, hey, I'm Alyson, the misdemeanor. Like, no, I say Alyson,
Right.
the mom, Alyson, the, founder of Perfect Ink.
Right.
So we help them to kind of think about, why do you do this? And then we assist to say, could this be a new way that you can think about it? And part of our curriculum is that now with the movement, I would say, of the DEI movement, diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's usually focused on being a person of color or your gender or your sexual preference or whatever the case may be. And they use these to say, I'm going to hire people in those categories to show that we're DEI proactive. But then they totally forget about people who's formerly incarcerated. So we teach our perfectors, as we affectionately call them, is to use that incarceration as a platform to help others as opposed as a label to keep you down. And that's where it kind of plays into it. And even on our social media page, we did something like in the program and we followed our perfectors, that particular cohort, from the first day to the last day. And the thread or the theme is always the same, that when they exit out of our curriculum, that they have a confidence that they never had before, or they never thought that they could get before. And to me, that's like the best thing our organization can do. And that's how we play a part, because every day that they come in, we let them know, hey, beautiful, hey, awesome, you're stupendous. Like, we try to reaffirm those positive things, as opposed to, because everybody else is just stuck on this one thing, we got to open the door and get them to think differently.
I'm still listening to what you're saying. I actually am doing the one thing they tell you that you're supposed to do, which is don't be ready for the next thing. Don't be preparing your response while you're listening, because I'm just like totally listening to what you're saying. And so I guess I'm trying to think of the question. When you are doing all of this sort of building of worth with folks, are there certain people that do seem to say, like, maintain their sense of worth throughout this process? And if they are, is there some sort of pattern or something that you see that sort of helps them? Because I'll just tell you sort of my line of thinking, and this is a conversation that Riley had when the two of us had when we were talking about the organization, is that, like, even looking back, and I don't mean to compare like COVID with being incarcerated, but when you're taken out of what you're used to, right? When your life is X, Y, or Z, and this is what your daily life looks like, and this is where everything is supposed to be. And then now you're taken and you're putting in a completely different environment. And it's a negative environment. And not only are you not being given any positive reinforcement, but you're also probably not being given that opportunity to find your own positive feelings. Like people got stuck in COVID and they're like, well, I'm going to bake bread and now I'm a bread baker, like you're not given that opportunity to help yourself build yourself up. So I guess my question is sort of about that experience of when we tie so much to this busyness and the productivity, and even if we don't have that internal sense of worth, at least we can check something off our to-do list. And then if there were women that you have found that are able to sort of retain that sense, or maybe find their way back faster than other ones, is there something that you find similar with them?
I think what it is the point of just being fed up. A lot of our women have gone through the justice system or incarceration more than one time. And they just get to that point where they're just like, hey, I don't want to do this anymore. And then that's when they need kind of that lifeline, if you will, or that raft to say, okay, I know I don't want to do this, but how do I get to a place where I don't make those same mistakes, right? And then you have individuals where they're like, hey, I don't want to be here anymore, but it's kind of like, to make light of it, if you will, like if you say, oh my gosh, I want to lose weight. I've been wanting to lose weight since my second child. And, I do want to do it. But then when Popeyes calls my name, it's kind of like, give me the strawberry jam and the biscuit. And it's like, I want to do it, but the biscuit's better. So it really isn't. I think our organization gives them the tools to transition, and we give them definitely the support to transition. But for the main difference between those that kind of stay on the path and then those that just says whatever is just, they just really haven't gotten to the point of, I don't want to do it anymore. They've more or less gotten to the point where they're like, okay, I'm able to identify this is bad. I'm able to identify this isn't the best, but I'm not really to pull away from it. And then you have the ladies who's just like, okay, I've identified this is bad and I totally don't want to go through it again. And then those are the ladies that kind of stick it out and they take advantage of the tools. Like one of the things that I always tell them in our orientation class is like, hey, if I could do it for you, I promise you I would go through the classes. I would work. And that's authentic. If I could, I really, really would. But the reality of it is that I can't. And you're the one that's going to have to walk this path. And I'm going to be your cheerleader. I'm going to hold your hand. If we're lacking something, I'm going to find you an answer. But at the end of the day, you have to make the choice to walk the path and to stay on the path.
It's true. And it's true with any kind of change. And I was listening to, I've forgotten who now, but I was listening to somebody talking about, personal development, and, people will resist being changed. They won't necessarily resist change, but they'll resist being changed. Right. And so if you want to change, then essentially you eventually will. You'll resist people trying to change you, and trying to force change down your throat. But if you want to change, then, you'll take the necessary steps eventually, as you say. The jam and the biscuit, I don't know. Sometimes you want the jam and the biscuit. But we have to wrap up pretty soon. But I do want to.
I'm so sad.
Sorry, I know. I could talk to you all. I could have this conversation for hours, honestly. And I'm sure you have other things you need to get to. But I do want to ask you, after having spent sort of this hour talking to us, obviously about this cult of busyness and about self-worth, do you think that anything in the way you go about your to-do list or anything about how you look at self-worth has changed? Or do you feel like, not really? Or how do you feel about sort of your position on self-worth and busyness?
I think that it's evolved. It's evolved and I've been enlightened. I think that there are certain parts of my life where the busyness allowed me to not focus on the things I didn't want to focus on. So like I would dive into all of these different things. So that way, whatever was bothering me or whatever I didn't want to deal with, I would have a reason to be distracted. and to not deal. And I think that I've evolved to identify, okay, when is it those times? And then now that I know that, I've identified that goes into self-worth. Okay, you got to deal with what you need to deal with in order to evolve, in order to grow, in order to be better, because people are depending on you. And like right now, having two small kids, like I have two small boys, but they're depending on me to be their example of what's right, their example of what's good. And they're going to make their own decisions in life. They're going to, do whatever, but I got to kind of be their example. So I think that I've evolved to kind of work out my stuff. So that way I'm not relying on busyness to keep me from dealing. And then I've evolved to identify, okay, you know what? It's okay to say no. Like, that's such a powerful statement. It's okay to say no. And it's like, okay. And even like, sometimes even at work, it's like, okay, I'm doing this program and somebody will say, oh, I want to volunteer because I have a great idea for what you should add to the program. That's magnificent. But at the end of the day, I know what we have the bandwidth to do, and your great idea may not fit into our bandwidth. So at the cost of maybe turning you off as a volunteer, or at the cost of maybe you saying something negative about the organization because you came with us with an idea that in your mind we should take because this is what's needed for people of incarceration, I have to be okay with saying, yes, thank you, but nope, not going to be able to do it. So I would say that that's kind of like how I evolved, and it's always something that I'll be working on.
Yeah.
That is awesome. I don't want this to end, but somebody's going to have to pick up my kids from school. So and I imagine you have other things to do today. We don't need to take another break because we're actually on top of our breaks, but we get to jump into our bold questions. So Riley, are you excited to be the asker?
I'm very excited, other than I don't get to ask follow-up questions, which I'm always disappointed
These are
by.
just quick questions off the top.
Okay.
All right. So just answer in
Jeopardy. I'm ready.
Yeah, like Jeopardy. Exactly. Answer, in like a sentence or so.
Okay.
Nothing too complicated. All right. 5 questions. The first one is, what is on your nightstand?
Vaseline and 2 candles.
Okay. Who is at the top of your playlist right now?
Ooh, I have no clue. I have no clue. I don't have a playlist.
I had to look it up for when she asked me. I was like, on my Spotify.
I don't have a playlist.
That's all right.
That's okay. That's an answer in itself.
Exactly. 3, how do you relax?
Eat. That's terrible. But I love a good restaurant and a good meal. It's just so rewarding.
There is literally nothing bad about nourishing your body.
Yes.
I'm just gonna throw
also,
that out there.
I know now I'm the one making side comments, which is so not allowed. But you mentioned Popeyes, and I had 3 soccer games that had me driving by Popeyes this weekend, and I did not stop one time because I was always late, and I am so sad. Like now you mentioned it, and I'm just like, I should have made the time.
All right. Number 4, favorite beverage.
Strawberry lemonade.
Oh, good call.
And now I'm thirsty. Number 5. This is our tough one.
Okay.
What is the best piece of advice you have ever received?
Love yourself.
Apparently not a tough one.
Well, I was like, I'm telling you, I want to take notes because you've shared the divorcing yourself and there's a variety of things.
The good news is we've recorded this too.
I know. I can't wait to listen to it. Where can people find you on all the socials? We'll obviously include this in the show notes, but if people are in a rush to learn about you right now, where can they find you or your organization?
We are on all social media platforms with the exception of, I think, Snapchat, at Perfect 129. So that's PERFECT 129.
Excellent.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. It was really, really like delightful to talk to you. It was so much fun. We love having you on. And we appreciate you taking the time and for being so open and honest and transparent with us. I say this every time we do an interview because I genuinely believe it. It is not easy. It took me a long time to open up, and all our interview subjects come on and are just like, hello, here's my life. And it took me like 6 months to be able to do that. So I personally appreciate it. I know Tova does. And we loved having you on. So thank you for being here. And thank you everybody listening and watching on YouTube. We appreciate all of you as well. We will be back next week with another episode. And until then, everyone have a wonderful week.
Thanks so much for listening to We Go Boldly podcast. We know you're busy and we love spending time with you.
If you enjoyed this week's episode, let us know. Head to Apple Podcasts right now to rate and review our show. While you're there, be sure to click that subscribe button.
Want more us time? Follow us on all the socials at Go Boldly Together.
Want even more us time? As in all the coaching pizzazz. Find us at goboldlyinitiative.com for all the info.
We will be back with more excitement, research, and deep thoughts next week.
Until then, keep on being the bold, brave, amazing people we know you already are.